Okay. So do you mind just stating your name and position, I guess, for the recording,
For the record.
for the record?
Yeah, my name is David Thomas. I'm the Director of Academic Technology at CO Online in the Office of Information Technology.
Cool. Thanks. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed for this class project. I'm really looking forward to hearing about what you guys do and how you said that your approach to project management is a little non-traditional in some ways. I'm really interested to hear how you would describe it.
Yeah, in the software world, there's been several kind of iterations of stuff, and you'll hear most software development shops now say they work in the agile model, and
Mm-hmm.
agile is not unmanaged, but it really sort of reflects the fact that small teams working iteratively on concise tasks kind of makes better software.
Mm-hmm.
While I never explicitly modeled agile, for the most part, I've tried to scope the project so that they could be achieved by small teams. And
Mm-hmm.
usually, I mean, a small team could be, one or two people. Even on a bigger project, it might be three or four people, kind of the core team, and then sort of support people. And when you run really small teams like that, loading something like project up doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It creates an enormous amount of apparent structure that then really doesn't necessarily guide you. Now, again, I want to put some caveats around this because it depends on what you're doing, right? If you're building a house, for example, and there really is an order that things have to go in, and time is of the essence, and you can't just wait and see when the carpenter's done to call the electrician. I think project management software makes a lot more sense, but in these kind of more fluid environments that I work in terms of like software implementation and configuration and training, there's a lot of complexity that's not apparent up front. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I like to keep things really open. So I'll give you a quick example. When we implemented Canvas, we actually, and I'm going to skip the whole selection process. Once we knew we were going to work with Canvas, we were going to retire Blackboard and eCollege. So we had two systems it was replacing. And it
Mm-hmm.
was a ton of work. I mean, all of our online courses were on the systems. I mean, the vast majority of our faculty used it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a ton of stuff that had to be done. And there were a lot of people involved in that, but the core team was myself and three other people. And
Okay.
actually used to run that. And by the way, it also had some really hard deadlines. It's
Yeah.
like certain things had to be done before the semester started so that people could log in and get their classes, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I mean, many people were involved in this project, but the four kind of core people, we tracked the whole thing in this tool called Trello. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I haven't used it, but
It's a really neat and simple list management software. And so, and I'll still this day when I talk about the Canvas migration, I always joke, guess which project management tool we use? And the answer is we didn't use one. We would meet, pretty much daily, and we would go through the Trello lists. And the nice thing with the Trello lists are, if something came up that needed to be done, they'd put it on a list. And the lists are all broken down by, subject matter. Was it
Mm-hmm.
a training thing? Was it a configuration thing? Was it a, whatever. And so we just kept punching off the things on the list. And so there was a certain priority to things, but for the most part, everyone on the team knew what the priorities were, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that managing that way, and by the way, it was a huge success. We met or exceeded every benchmark we set for ourselves in terms of timelines and cost and everything.
That's awesome.
To a certain extent, it's not like, it was just like, whoa, it's all completely crazy. From the more professional project management crowd, it probably looked like that. But, at the end of the day, money talks. I mean, we saved, I set aside $500,000 for that conversion, and we ended up spending less than 100 of it.
Oh my gosh.
Just didn't need it. I had little boxes on things for hiring casts of thousands to help manage stuff, and we just didn't need it. The problems didn't arise. So it was good they had all that contingency. But my point is like when I talk about this kind of more agile approach to project management, my heart's really in it because I think that smart people that have clear goals and enough resources don't need a Pareto chart to tell them
Mm-hmm.
today I have to do X, Y, and Z. So that's sort of in general. Again, if I was managing a construction project, I'd probably sing a different tune. But because I would want to have lots of people coordinated on a timeline. And, if my concrete guy pushed 2 days, I need to let everybody else know stuff pushed. But, on a team of 4, it's just like,
Yeah, it's a little easier to keep up with everyone, I would imagine.
Yeah, you bet. So, I mean, the analogy would be like, running an exchange calendar system for your family instead of just having a calendar on the refrigerator. It's kind
Right.
of, at one point in time, the tool gets in the way.
Right.
Now, with all that said, I mean, I have a ton of ire for project management as it is often practiced because it invents structure that wants to believe is true. And I've had my battles with project managers who want long-term estimates for things, and then they want me to guarantee that the estimates are accurate. And I'm like, especially in software development, you just don't know sometimes. So
yeah, I mean, as the course of a project goes on, I imagine, well, especially the longer the time frame is for getting a project done, right, the less you're able to predict how much you'll be able to stay on time by the end of it.
Yeah, and I don't have a magic number for you, but at a certain number of coordinated resources, I would say you probably pull out your copy of project or something else. But give or take 7 people, it's probably not worth the overhead. That doesn't mean you don't track stuff. It doesn't mean you don't keep lists. It doesn't mean you don't set targets and milestones. It's just you don't pretend that you know what's going to happen 2 weeks in advance. You say this needs to be done in 2 weeks, and then you kind of work through it. And in fact, I can give you there's a classic paper. It's an economics paper, but it's called the Fine Art of Muddling Through. It's Charles Schwab. This paper. Which is nuts. I think it was 1964, but it's a very dense paper. But the nut of it is, he's considered the father of incrementalism in policy planning, and the basic idea is that you can't have enough information up front to do everything you need to do, and when you do really extensive plans, you create the illusion of control. The illusion of control then sometimes collides with reality. So he was saying, make broad plans and iterate, or he called it, work in increments. And I think there's some enormous logic in that. And so my little thing that I always throw out there is I said, you got to decide when you start a project, are you managing a city? Are you building an airplane? Because if you're building an airplane, there's a certain amount of rigor in the process of the creation of the thing that you probably want to do more formal things. But a lot of more things we do today are more like running a city, and you can't make a comprehensive, detailed plan for the city that says the trash trucks will do this, the mailman will do this, because then it snows. Then what do? Well, you change everything. So
right, you can't really account for all of the risks that might come up.
So what you do is you break it down, you in charge people. I was just reading a really interesting book. You may have heard of it called Made to Stick.
Yeah, I think I did see that recently.
And the first chapter is really good because it talks about, and this is about messaging, but it talks about simplicity. And how messages need to be very simple. And I mean, it's also, I think, an extremely good point of view that every project manager should read, because it kind of argues that, and the good example is they talk about the Army. They had to change how they planned after a while because, the joke is all battle plans fail on first contact. In other words, just like, everything goes to shit as soon as people are shooting at each other. And so the whole idea that, I'm supposed to do this, and then, it's like I'm supposed to take that hill, and then, unexpected, there's something I can't do it, and you just don't know what to do. So they said they switched to this thing called commander's intent. And so what you would say is the commander's intent of this order, take the hill, is to guard the flank of this armor unit. And so if I can't take the hill for whatever reason, I may still be able to guard that flank, right? So I have discretion to actually make sure the whole machine functions. And I love that idea because an army is a very, very large and complicated thing. And they're basically saying, when things are in action, project's not going to help you. To know what's supposed to have happened doesn't help you deal with what is happening. And so there's a balance point. And I hope this is what you're interested in, because this is kind of how I think about project management. So,
well, what I think is also interesting too is the idea of, I mean, we've talked some about this in the class, but the idea of managing versus leading, and it sounds to me like what you're talking about is that there's a limit to what managing can accomplish, and maybe what you're trying to do is create a system where people can lead more effectively.
I think that's fair. I mean, another big kind of component of my whole kind of leadership, worldview is this guy Dennis Kenlaw, and he wrote a book called Coaching for Commitment. And Kenlaw's basic thesis is you can have compliance from employees, or you can have commitment. And employees will comply; they will do what you said, but they will only do what you said. And when it's 5 o'clock, they will go home, right? And it's a culture of, well, that's not my job. He said committed employees are like so much more productive. They quote, said, don't go home at 5 if the job's not done, because the job matters. They'll always reach out to help somebody else because, and so he had these elements that he thought how you would coach employees for commitment. And I won't go into all of that, but it's the same basic idea, which is to say this isn't just, some sort of like lifestyle choice. It's really about organizations function a lot better when the people in the organization know what's going on and have the resources to get things done. It's back to commander's intent, right? I mean, my job may be to say, we need to get 95% of spring for fall faculty on the new LMS, by April or, by August 15th. Great, right? Everybody knows what we're shooting for, right? But I don't say, I need you, Rachel, to have, converted 5 courses every day, and I need to see your metric, and, and then you're just kind of like, just turning the crank, right?
Right.
Instead, you're like, wow, we've got 500 courses to convert. How are we going to get this done? Let's figure it out and let's get it done, And so it's more fun to work in that environment. So,
yeah, doing more like problem solving or allowing some more creativity to come through.
Totally. I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, this is editorializing, though it's probably true. Project management is a part of the science of logistics. Get moved around. Guess how old the science of logistics is? Off the top of your head.
I would say since like like Ford, maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe even older, maybe Napoleon.
They invented the science of logistics to support the Berlin airlift at the end of World War II. They were trying to figure out how to get all this stuff moved around. And so they started coming up with these policies and procedures. And so I think that we're at the end of this sort of industrial era of management. Everyone has a job. I treat you like a part in the machine. You're totally interchangeable. And we're moving more into this kind of, information economy where I'm empowering you as another bright human being on this planet to work with me to make what we all want to happen. And so I think that, like I mentioned briefly, you saw it in the software business. They used to manage software according to this thing called the waterfall model. And it sort of meant like all these things would happen, then all these things would happen, then all these things would happen. And projects constantly went over budget, over time. They didn't work. And what people realize, it's like, companies like Microsoft even started to realize, it's like, they'd say put 10 good people on a team and they can write an operating system, and if you put 100 people on that team, you will never get it done.
Right.
And so there's something to be said for unleashing what people are capable of.
Yeah, I actually heard something on NPR last week talking about the gaming industry and how they're releasing games even before they're totally beta tested, just because they would rather get the feedback about what people want, and then they can go online and revise it. So they're kind of crowdsourcing the development of their software, which I thought was really interesting.
I would have liked to have heard that. I've written about the video game industry for years, and I can tell you why they release software. It's not because of that. It's because of how it's funded. They fund on milestones. So basically, you don't get paid until the game ships.
Oh, okay.
So they would rather ship a buggy game and keep fixing it because they got paid. But
okay.
probably something to the other part of it too, but behind the funding model, the video game industry is really hideous. So
yeah, and that's kind of interesting too, like how you incentivize people to get a job done well, right?
But if you look around, in your own experience, you could probably think of like the places you like to work are places where what needs to be done, and then you're given the resources and the room to just get it done. I mean, never has it been said that micromanagement is a good thing, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a bad thing. So why do we keep doing it? Rachel, I'm going to plan out your next 6 months and put it on a, in a PowerPoint so I can, or in a project file so I can track exactly how many minutes of allocation you have against the tasks that we agreed that you were going to. So you start playing the system rather than trying to get the job done.
Yeah, I always feel like that kind of comes out of a place where people are, fearful. I don't know. They're worried that the people who are working for them aren't doing their jobs, and that's going to reflect badly on them or something.
Yes, it takes a lot of courage to manage where you trust people, because I don't, someone asks me, my boss asks me, why isn't that done? The answer is usually like, I don't know. I have to go find out. I can't just pop open some scientific looking thing and just be like, this is 74% complete. And I have the projected end date of, 12. And so, I have to trust that, well, the way I do it is I trust that nothing ever breaks, everything gets done. People stop asking me because they just know. They might say, when is that supposed to happen? And I'll say, I'm not sure, let me find out. But nobody frets because they just like, well, I don't know, let's see online, guys. This stuff gets done, stuff doesn't break, stuff just magically appears when it's supposed to.
So we don't need to be looking over their shoulders all the time to figure that out anyway.
I think there's something to be said for that. Absolutely. So.
So along those lines, what are a few of the most important strategic decisions that you feel like you guys have made to enable that kind of work environment? Like, how did you set that up?
It's an excellent question. My career has kind of like the before and after part. I spent, I probably spent almost 20 years in maybe 15 in corporate America. So I worked for the phone company. I worked for Pearson, and I just, I learned a lot, but I learned a lot of negative lessons. I learned a lot about how to break things. I learned a lot how to make people unhappy.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about the culture of cover your ass, and but I also learned from really good people things like this Dennis Kenlaw stuff. And so I think when I came to the university, I had brought that with me. And so I already knew I didn't like rigid structures. I didn't like these hideous accountabilities where really I would or I would get put on a project plan. And if the project went well, the leaders would take all the credit, but if anything broke, they'd look through and they'd find somebody to blame, So when I came to higher ed, I just didn't want to do that. And higher ed also just is kind of funny because, the idea of shared governance, things are very flat here. The top's not really in control. The top's influential and has a lot of leadership. So I think that already higher ed had a lot of the values that I already had. Think about it. Our faculty are a crazy collection of, intellectual entrepreneurs. They're all running their own little business. And so, so I think that there was already an appetite for that. And when I got here, when they actually gave me this job, the guy that ran this department before, he was quite a bit more of a process manager than I was. And the guy that used to run the web team here, he's very much a process manager. And so my boss at the time, I just had to make sure he understood I wasn't going to do that. I just wasn't going to do that. So I said, Bob, I want you to know that my goal with this team is to run a team of very talented individual contributors, right? That's kind of how I described it. And at the time it was a very small team. And so, I think he was willing, okay. And we were successful because I worked with a team of really talented people and I let them be talented. And, I still had to sort of direct fire in a sense, like, where are we going? But, they all, I always say they were like an old commando team. My job was to say, blow up that bridge, not how to blow it up. I just would wait and then the bridge would blow up. So I think that I had some sort of intellectual preparation and some organizational experience that prepared me, but I had amazingly supportive, people above me that were basically willing to let me manage in a way that was not comfortable for them.
Okay.
And and as I'm here longer and longer, and I have people working under me that have people working under them, I have to kind of, there's that tendency to just be kind of like looking down there and being like, got to make those people work hard. But I have to remember. So I'm now, I learned how to do it from below, but now I'm trying to learn better and better how to facilitate a culture of excellence, a culture of, talented individual contributors. And I tell you what, I'm still learning that. It's not impossible, but it's tough. So.
We have been talking some too about a learning organization, and I don't know if you've heard that specific term before, but just a cult, and it goes along with that idea of culture. So how do people keep growing within their positions? How do you grow as a unit? And what are some of the things that you guys have done that you think have really, would you consider your unit an example of a learning organization? It sounds like you might. And what have you guys done that might facilitate?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I've never used that term, but I'm sort of vaguely familiar with it. A couple of things come to mind. I mean, the first thing is I'll tell you is you kind of have to keep challenging people. And again, if you look back to this idea of I want talented individual contributors, I'm kind of recruiting from this nutty bunch of people that don't want a desk job. They don't want to just sit down and do the same thing every day, right? And those people are fun and they're awesome and they're really good, but they're also like, they're like wild animals. They get bored,
Right.
And so, so you kind of have to keep feeding them new and interesting work. Well, I tell you what, you have to go through periods of maintenance. It's like after you implemented Canvas, those guys nailed it. I mean, I've never worked with a better team that had more success, but now my commando team is, basically back on base, make your bed, march.
Right.
And they're like, this sucks. Like, we want to go blow something up. But I think that, the idea of a learning organization is very appealing, but the friction on the other side is that, you've got to find a way to continually reset what you're doing to keep them engaged. So, I can't say, I want you to spend this year, going hard and migrating to a single LMS. And then I want you to spend the whole next year just, making sure it's running, just doing the same trainings over and over again, because you're kind of like, it's almost like you feel like you need two different sets of people to do that. So I think that in order to be a learning organization, so to speak, you kind of have to keep resetting what you're doing, and you have to kind of find ways to make sure you're doing the maintenance while you continually excite people about the next thing. Another challenge with that kind of learning organization, especially any kind of high impact organization, is that excellence becomes the new norm, And in some sense it's hard because everyone's already forgotten how crappy it was to have two LMSs. They have one. But now that's just de facto. We earn the praise and the credit for that, but now it's just kind of like, what it doesn't do. It's not, so people have short memories. So part of that resetting, I think, is also necessary because you can't let your excellence becomes the next, you become your own worst enemy. You become, your own bar. There was something else I was going to say too about this that I think, I know, is something I've done to kind of try to do with individuals is I have this sort of philosophy that says, if you work for me, there's job number one that you have to do. And there's the job that is your job. Like in our case, job number one is, I joke, it's answering the phone, right? You're supporting faculty or students or you should never tell someone you can't fix a problem or help a faculty member unless you're already fixing a problem or helping a faculty member. But since that's not evenly distributed, there's lots of time when you're not doing anything. And I try to have this idea of like special projects, and the definition of a special project is something that's important to the organization. It's something that you personally want to do, and it's something that will develop skills in you that will eventually make it so I can't afford to pay you what you're worth. And this is my kind of like Deadwood antidote. I'm like, I don't want to work with people who think they can't work at another place. I don't want to work with people who think that they've gone as far in their career as they can go. I don't want to work with those people. I don't want them on my team. I don't want them around. And because to me, that's a kind of a point in your life of where you're defeated and you don't care and you stop learning and you stop developing. And so I work really, really hard to make sure that, my team feels like, I'm learning new things, I'm experiencing new challenges, I'm getting better at what I want to get better at.
Yeah.
And that is a crazy balancing act because, like everybody can't do all the fun stuff, but I think that's part of how you do it. And you'll hear me talk a million times, and it doesn't matter how long I ever, how far I go in an organization. It's always going to be about the individuals. It's never about the collective. I mean, the collective is an incredibly powerful thing that results from the individuals, but you got to take care of all the individuals. And there's no good, hey, we have a great new happy hour, a great new like potluck policy. We're gonna have potlucks every Friday and expect it's going to change the culture. I mean, you kind of have to work at the individual level, and that gets harder the more people that are in your sort of span of influence. But if you want to know what I do for a living, I joke that I go to meetings for a living. Actually, it's not a joke. That's true.
Yeah.
But I peddle influence. I don't do anything anymore. I go around and I try to make sure I have good relationships with people. I try to serve people's needs, and I try to talk them into stuff that I think that we ought to be doing.
Yeah, that definitely resonates for me. I mean, that's what our director does here at the ESL Academy too. Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, just meetings, and you're trying to convince people to build the project, right? In the way that
sales, everything's sales. So, yeah. So, I guess there's probably other things that you could probably do that I might work in a learning organization. Since we're in higher ed, I mean, if we look at the SEAL Online core values, one of them is research. And, we deal with faculty, and it turns out our faculty really like to know that things have been deeply looked at, right?
Right.
They're not wild about wild hair opinions, and so, so I invest pretty heavily in that. And it takes different forms. And in my line of work, there's not a lot of training classes you can go to. There's some. But, I really make sure I have plenty of money in the budget for doing conference travel. I really encourage my staff to present at conferences, to really challenge themselves to do that. We're constantly pulling out new things and trying them out. So, hey, I'll do it myself. I'll be like, I did a lecture last year at Colt called, it was about the lecture. I was just like, okay, next hour I'm going to teach you how to fix the lecture. I just picked this like crazy thing that was on my mind and decided I'm going to spend the next 6 months figuring out how to fix the lecture, in the modern age. And it came out pretty good. And I think that I model that, but I think we try to encourage the idea that like we need to keep being smarter. We need to be looked at as experts. But I think if I ever left higher ed, which I don't think I ever would, I would fight for that, because when people stop learning, that's probably when they stop developing professionally. It's when they start dying on the vine. So
yeah, you definitely need to find ways to keep encouraging that. How did you fix the lecture, by the way? Do you have a copy of that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I got this. I think I wonder if they recorded it. The whole bottom line on it was just like, in this day and age, I mean, the lecture comes from the Latin term to read. And the source of the lecture was just the fact that like the professor was the guy who owned the book. I owned the book. And so I just stood up there and read the book so you could copy the book down, right?
Right.
It was a method of dissemination of information. And then it kind of kept going. And, at this point in time, you're just saying everything in your lecture is on the internet. And if it's not, it's just because you didn't put it there. So you're like, why are we still talking in front of a class? And so I said, well, there's a reason to talk in front of a class. And you kind of show models of like TED Talks, right? You clearly like listening to people talk, and lecture series. And like I talk about this thing, I have this philosopher's lectures from Berkeley. It's just a recording. I'm talking in a room on my computer to listen to. Why? So like, it's not fair to be like, oh, the lecture's dead. No readings of the lecture anymore. So that was the setup. The question then was, so what's the lecture for? And I said, well, if you just look at it, it's right in front of you. It's like the reason we like to watch lectures is because we want to hear how experts think and act and work. So it's like, I want to see, I like use like Henry Rollins lecturing. I want to see what a old punk rocker looks like. I want to see how they hold their body. I want to see how they talk. Because modeling is a really important part. I want to see live how Henry Rollins thinks about the world, so I can get a sense of like what's it like to be his brain. I want to see how he works. So I'd say if you're a math teacher, I want to be. I can learn math online, but I want to see you standing in front of a board. I want to see how you dress, what's your behavior like. I want to see how you solve problems, how you look at them. you know. And so, and the thing is, this was the kicker. 95% of what we do in the lecture isn't that.
It's just too flat. You don't get the modeling.
Yeah, and so, you know, my whole point was just like the lecture became popular is because it really forced the teacher into the mode of actually behaving, being the expert, you know, acting like an expert. So it was kind of a funny talk because it really, I think faculty first thought I was going to tell them that they were all full of beans, you know, but then it was like, no, I'm like, in fact, to the opposite. I'm like, I really want you to demonstrate your expertise. You know, I don't want to learn chemistry from you. I want to see what it's like to be a chemist, thinking about chemistry, solving chemical problems, you know.
It's really interesting. I've never heard it quite put that way before.
Yeah. So here's an example of just like, you know, nobody asked me to do this, you know. It wasn't like I didn't punch some button somewhere. It was just like, I'm like, this comes up a lot. I am going to figure this out. I'm going to spend time and energy and, you know, you know, you take it out and present it publicly, and it's just great. So I encourage the entire team to do that. Not everybody's good at it. Some people, they're more quiet, research focused. But, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, isn't it funny? It's not that complicated. This is the thing. There's a million flavors. It's a lifetime to master. But at the end of the day, it's like respect people, feed people. You know, recognize that individuals have personalities. Are. You know, it's just, I mean, to me, it's just like, I'm a humanist. This is a very humane way of doing things. I mean,
you don't treat people like robots, basically.
Yeah, totally. I have this other kind of fun thing. It never makes sense, but I say it anyway, because whenever somebody quits, I says, remember, replace the position, not the person. Because when I see what happens, people are always trying to find someone that's like the person that left. No person like the person that left.
Right.
If your job is that tight fit, then you're not optimized to take advantage of the special skills and abilities of the people that come in. So we always reset every time someone leaves. We move things around, and then we say, all right, what's the biggest gap? Let's hire someone who wants to do those things. And they're not going to fit in that box, but they'll be responsible for that box. But the cool thing is they'll do all these other things. I give you a perfect example. When we did the Canvas migration, we hired like an implementation manager, conversion manager, right? And we kind of knew what we wanted, but the guy that we ended up hiring, there wasn't a word on the job rec about programming, but this guy had a programming background. And he wasn't shy about it. He's just like, He says, but I really like to program. I would hope that I would have some chances to program this job. And we're like, that's kind of his X factor, isn't it? So we hired between two guys, both of them great candidates. We hired the guy with the programming experience. I'll tell you what, that was the luckiest freaking thing I ever did in my life. He wrote programs that kept that project above water. He ran enrollments on his laptop for the entire University of Colorado Denver for 6 months.
Wow.
Programs that he wrote. And if it wasn't for that, I have no idea what would have happened. We would have probably been running around, spending money, going crazy. But he just fixed the problem. He wrote some code, and every day he ran that code on his laptop. And now he actually just got a new job. He went to go work for Instructure. But you know, I'm just kind of like going, yeah, you got it. You know, this guy's standing there, and you're like, this isn't the person that we were looking for, but this is the person that we're going to hire.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the agility too, like recognizing that you might not always know what you need until you see it in front of you, in a way.
Yeah. So, and you know, but again, it's looking at the person first. You know, I mean, it's not like he came here and he said, well, I just want to program and I refuse to manage the Canvas. You know,
right.
Like that would be a mistake, right? But he's like, yes, I will manage the Canvas implementation. Oh, by the way, I'm a really talented programmer. You know? Or just you find out, like, I mean, this is another kind of silly example, but like we hired this academic tech guy, Mike. Mike's great, very talented at what he does. He's also an accomplished musician. I mean, and so I have tasked him to write music for our videos and stuff. And I mean, this stuff is like completely professional, right? And you know, he doesn't always want to do it, and it's not in his job description, but he does it. It's amazing, you know.
Yeah.
So just take advantage of the fact that, like, and when Mike quits, am I gonna say you must be able to write original music? No.
Right.
By the same token, wouldn't it be horrible if I was just like, well, no, I don't want you spending time playing your banjo at work, you know? So.
Right, and then you lose out on.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, think about it. It's like, oh, that's how the rest of life works. Why did we get in this idea at work that it's just like, no, I hired you to, basically be a monkey in a machine and pull the levers and the lights blink. So,
Hmm. Well, that's really cool. That basically all the questions I had. Did you have anything else you feel like I should? I don't know if you're going to give me some advice or something besides just treating people like people.
treating people decently. I'm curious. So this is what's the class in the ILT program? I probably should have asked. I hope that I even came close to what you're looking for, but
Yeah, no, this is it's leadership in information and learning technology programs. That's the title
okay.
of the course.
Who's teaching the class?
Um, a guy named Kenny, and I actually can't think of his last name right now.
Okay.
It's just
I
sort of
think I
crazy.
know who that is. So yeah, I guess I'll tell you one other thing I think that might be like helpful when you think about this because uh, there's the saying it's like culture is not the most important thing, it's the only thing.
Hmm.
And that's true. I mean, as I am in organizations longer and longer, it's amazingly true. But it's like every industry has its own culture, And I remember once that I went on a tour of Boeing. I was hired for the phone company, and walked into the office supply room, right? And there's a table, and on the table there's stapler and a hole punch and scissors, but there's tape where each thing goes on this table, right?
Oh wow! So they could like fit it.
Yeah, and I was just like, I'm like, wow, that's really weird. You guys are really organized. And the
Mhm.
guy who's giving the tour, he goes, we're engineers, right? And the more I talked to them, I started to realize it's like Boeing wasn't an engineering company in the sense that they made airplanes. They were an engineering company in the sense that they were engineers. Like the
Mhm.
company itself was like a giant engineer that wanted order and precision and and so um and a year later I was at United and I was actually applying for a job, but this old salty guy sits down and he says there's two things you need to know about the airline. First thing is all the money spent near the customer, that means the planes. And so like this is corporate headquarters for United Airlines, and it was a dump. I mean, I'm telling you, it was a
Wow.
dump. This is well after the time when their voicemail was in common use in businesses. They had answering machines, tape answering machines on their desk. So he's trying to explain to me is like life in the corporate headquarters ain't grand.
Pretty,
The
yeah.
money is spent by the airplane. The other thing he says you need to know is he says airlines are run by operations people, and he says operations people don't believe in planning because one storm over Chicago and the whole thing goes to hell. So he says everything in the airline is reactive. They react, right? I ended up going to work for them. But the reason I'm giving you those kind of stories is because when you look at the like leading in learning industries, they have a culture.
Hmm.
And I think that it's important to think about what it's like to be a leader in K-12 or what it's like to be a leader in higher ed because it's different. And I have watched unfolding disasters where they've brought in people from outside that are process experts or business management experts, and it collides. They don't understand. They assume that an efficiency expert from Boeing would be useful to higher ed in the same way that like my nutty way of doing things would be helpful to a Boeing
Hmm.
division. You kind of have to respect that the leadership. So the leadership style I'm expressing in a certain sense is not only personal to me, but it's also very much what I think works in higher ed. Uh,
Right.
I think the very matrix, shared resourcing, shared governance, transparent, open. I think all those kinds of things, and a decent respect for individuals is just
Hmm.
higher ed. So I think you got to look at that, and like I don't know, like if you went and worked in K-12, there's some different things there. You have parents. All of a sudden, your
Right.
customer has this other thing attached to them accountable to, and there's and you got little kids, and
Hmm.
so certain kinds of habits and behaviors and ways of thinking and being are going to be different. So that'd be the only thing I would tell you as you think about it.
To
You
know the
can't pull
culture.
leadership off the book and be a leader. I think you have to be a leader of something. Like I shouldn't be commanding army units.
Neither should I.
I don't know how to do that. Maybe in a different life I could have learned how to do it, but so I think that's important. So
Yeah, well, thanks. It's really helpful, David, and I appreciate your time today.
yeah, you're welcome. I hope it wasn't too much. If you have any other questions, let me know. I mean, this is actually what I do for a living. I just talk about stuff. So
Yeah, well, I'm glad I could be part of your influence peddling.
absolutely.
Sure.
So what year are you? Is this the ILT Master's program or is it the PhD?
Yeah, it's the master's program. I've just been taking a few classes,
Okay.
because we get the benefit through
Right.
CU Denver, and I thought it would be a good way to expand my skill set and kind of stay
Right. How do
updated.
you like the classes? I just several of us have taught in the ILT program for years. So
Have you taught classes for them?
yeah, I taught this games and learning class up until this year. They hired a new faculty member who had that background, and so they've had me teaching this thing. It was started as a PhD seminar, but they opened it up for master's students, and I can't remember what it's called. It's called Developing Digital Communities or something, but it's really a class about kind of how do you do professional development type activities online. So I don't know if I teach it again, I need to fix it. It's broken. So
I always feel that way about whatever I teach. It's like and that maybe that's part of like recognizing that different classes even have different cultures, but it's something that always needs to be changed. You can never just deliver the same content every term.
And if you do, it gets really boring. So
that's also true. Yeah, but so far it's been interesting. I mean, this is my first experience really taking courses online, to be perfectly honest. And so that's been, and like, I've learned a lot just from that. And I've learned how to use Canvas much better as a teacher because of what my students are doing. I mean, what my instructors have been doing. So that's been good too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say that, and this is just like a general, I don't know what you think, but I do feel like because the people who are in these classes, most of them work full time and are taking multiple classes, it's not quite as, I don't know. It could be like a little more intellectually stimulating sometimes. I think because, I don't know, people get busy and they, are like any other kind of student who gets busy and they skimp out on the readings and
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, there's a lot of full-time students in there, and they're full-time students and they're trying to work, and especially this time of year, they're just shoveling, just trying to get done. So.
Yeah. So that's been good for me to know too, because again, with my own teaching, I've been accused of being like a little too demanding, and I'm like, well, now I kind of get where they're coming from. So what the general institutional expectations might be, or how people are, I don't know.
There's nothing wrong with being demanding. I think that we probably all could demand more from our students, and they'd be better off for it. So yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, it's been a good experience so far.
Well, good. Well, who knows? You may cross paths with some of the CU Online folks. I don't know. So
yeah, I would imagine. And yeah, Colt is always a good opportunity for that too, I would guess.
Oh yeah, Colt's fun. Have you been before?
Yeah, I went a couple years ago. 2 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, it's shaping up to be another good year. I'm looking forward to it. So Mike and I are going to talk about what are we fixing? Oh, now we're fixing feedback.
Oh, you're fixing feedback.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'd love to hear about that because that's so time consuming.
It's another just sort of simple example of we got asked to go and give a talk up at Ames Community College to all their faculty. And it's from a former student of mine from the LT program. And I said, what do you want us to talk about? She goes, you can talk about whatever you want, just, And so I sat down with Mike and I go, well, let's talk about feedback because, we've been doing this a long time. And the number one problem with an online course is the faculty don't do feedback enough or correctly. So we did all the research and then we just kind of put it into some kind of funny stuff. And now it's like, okay, let's stop talking about this. Here's how to do feedback.
Right. And I will actually say that the instructors that I've had have actually been very good about that. So I don't know if they been in conversation. I mean, I don't know if they're reading the same stuff that you're reading or if they've been in conversation with you guys, but
It's probably a lot that just that they're education people, so you
hmm,
know, they're a little more in touch with the idea that there's such a thing as instructional design, or you know,
right.
that there are practices in teaching that make sense. So I think they're more well versed in this.
Hmm.
And the problem is, it's like, you know, a teacher who came up through to a PhD, basically being talked at from a whiteboard. Even especially when they get given to online, they just tape themselves standing,
Talking at a whiteboard. Uh-huh.
give a high stakes exam, and say, well, that's how I was trained, you
Yeah.
know. And so you're like, yeah, didn't make it right, but so. So
Cool.
anyway, so I think that's kind of like the tenor of this is not preaching. It's just sort of to be like, hey, look, we did the research, so you don't have to. You know.
That's right. And you can take it. Here you
So,
go.
but that's what we're going to talk about this year. So, but,
Cool.
yeah, it should be
Great.
fun.
All right, Dave. Well, have a great afternoon, and thanks
Yeah, you
again.
too. Good luck at getting this done, and then use Zoom. It's free. You can use it.
Yeah. Well, now that I have it on my computer, I think I actually could use that.
Yeah, and you know, the other important thing too is it's licensed for students as well.
Hmm.
So, you know, I know we've had these conversations, but it's like, if you have opportunities where you want to have students talking to students remotely, or encourage them to, you know, get a video pen pal they can talk to, they have
Okay.
access to this, so they can just log in the same way that I told you, and they got an account. So,
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely look into that more. That's an interesting idea.
and it's integrated into Canvas now too. There should be a hidden button that you can turn on so that you can actually
Hmm.
start from inside.
Yeah, I knew about it with Canvas. I just didn't realize it was independent of it.
Yeah. So that's the way we licensed it, was just very liberal, so that, you know, people could just use it. So.
Use it to solve those problems however they needed to. Cool.
Exactly. All
All
right.
right.
Well,
Take it
thanks.
easy, man.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.